We'll get Councillor Harrison Hunt to second that. All those in favour? Do you want debate?
Thank you.
Yeah. No, all those in favour say aye. Against? It's carried. Right, now we're moving on to item 9 CCHL, the final statement of intent, and we have Brian Pearson and Paul Silk here, and you wouldn't normally come to our meeting for this part, but I think there will be some questions eventually for that.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Morning.
Did you want to say anything, or should we just move into any questions that there might be?
I think we'll take the SOI as read and take any questions.
Perfect. Right.
That's okay.
Yeah, great. Is there anyone that does have questions? Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the work that you've done to get to this point. I was just interested in on page 143 of our report. So, sorry, I don't have page 13 of the statement of intent. It talks about the potential acquisition or divestment of assets and investments. Given that we've made a decision not to sell our public strategic assets, I'm just interested if there's any work going on with each of the companies to look at any sort of divestment of their operational services or bringing other partners on board. Are we aware of any? Are we aware of what the companies are doing in that regard? Are they doing anything, or have they kind of got the message that we're not keen to sell?
I think everyone's got a very clear message that we're proceeding with a mandate where we are retaining ownership of the existing assets within the portfolio.
Right. So there's no work being done behind the scenes that we're not aware of around any potential divestment of operations or leasing or anything like that?
Well, it depends where you draw the line. There are some elements of entering into leases, which, for example, in the Christchurch International Airport's property portfolio is the normal course of their business.
Sure.
So there's things that they're doing that. In terms of work to change the nature of the businesses that they have, is there anything happening in that regard? No.
Does Councillor Johansson have any specific concerns?
I guess I was just, like we've seen, I guess, I mean, obviously it's been a bit of a rocky road since we made the decision.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just be, I would just hope that we would be kept informed if there were proposals or offers or discussions being held. And I just wanted to, check in terms of our statement of intent, because it is quite permissive in terms of the work that the companies can do. I guess I don't understand at what stage would we be advised or notified of that, given the discussions that we had pre the asset sales decision.
Yeah, no, look, it's a very reasonable question, and we've got a session next week with the chairs and CEs of all the subsidiaries to have that conversation in terms of what does implementation of the enhanced status quo or our continued evolution to being a more active owner of this group of companies mean, and what does our role look like, which reflects your expectations of us to take a more active role.
The final question from me is, I don't know whether it's for you or for staff, but I guess one of the things that I thought we were doing was looking at having a best of council family approach across our different companies, so having regular discussions and engagements around where the opportunities are. Mm-hmm. I was quite shocked, for example, when the airport brought in a private company to do the concessions, when we've got Venues Otitahi doing similar things. So I'm just wondering if there is enough in the statement of intent, the final version, that brings the council companies together, working strategically together, rather than doing things in isolation of each other.
I think the whether there's enough in the statement of intent or not, there's certainly from CCHL and the subsidiaries' perspective a much closer alignment and a commitment to work much more closely together as a portfolio in the best interests of the city.
Look, and the updated statement of enduring expectations is very clear that the threshold to improving communication, improving engagement, and providing more timely information is low, and that's the expectation that we've passed on to the subsidiaries as well.
And that's going to be a work in progress. It is a work in progress because we're changing some sort of customary practice, and we're looking to ensure that there's a very low bar for no surprises.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Harrison-Hunt.
Kia ora, guys.
Kia ora.
I've just got a question around 3.4, which is on page 128 of our agenda. It has the table around the dividend forecasts, which has 55, 65 and 65 for the final SOI, but for the draft it was significantly lower. I note that you have a readjustment of your debt repayment profile as part of that. So just personally, it seems quite high. The dividends, the payback seems quite high in regards to what the capital injection is needed for the other companies. Is this, just looking at the change, is this predominantly the readjustment of the debt profile and not anything else within the companies themselves in terms of offsetting return?
Short answer is yes. So what that table reflects is the request that you made of us to consider the forecasted payment of those higher dividends throughout the SOI period, and CCHL board has decided that we will seek to meet those payments or those forecasts from within our own capacity. And so that is primarily through the deferral of debt repayment that we had planned to start this year, really, to accelerate that debt repayment piece. We haven't called on any of the subsidiaries to increase their dividends beyond what they had previously projected.
Okay. So can you just remind me of what the implications are of requesting, an extra 19 million in 25 and an extra 11 in 26?
Well, it simply means our debt repayment the profile of our debt repayment is changed.
So it's pushed out, or is it?
It's pushed out.
Lower.
It's pushed out.
Okay.
But over the course of the 10 years, it has the effect of reducing the debt repayment from around 480 million to about 460 million, which is the carrying cost of the additional debt that we intended to repay, but we're now applying to dividends.
Okay, and what's the interest rate looking like at the moment in terms of repaying back that debt?
Yeah, well, no, it's probably closer to 5 over that time period. But obviously, at this point in time, probably 65% of our debt portfolio is hedged. That's in line with our treasury policy.
Okay.
And then when we come to our forecasting process, we effectively use market interest rate forecasts to project what the debt servicing component will be through a 10-year period. So that is obviously subject to change as market interest rates change.
Okay. Last question, Madam Chair, is around the interest rates themselves. Are they projected to be coming down at any point?
Sorry, what was the question?
The interest in terms of the
Interest
repayments?
rates.
Yes, well, they are, yeah. So basically it doesn't matter with you look, you can start with the Reserve Bank's own forecasts, which are basically that the official cash rate will stay at around 5.5% for this year and then ease through 25. The market expectations are that the Reserve Bank will deliver rate cuts earlier than the first quarter of next year. So those expectations are being brought into the second half of 2024, and the ultimate path projected takes the cash rate down to 3.5% over a period of 2 years or so.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Just on that, because it was a question I had as well. We do have a discussion, aren't there, between staff and CCHL every annual and long-term plan about the dividends, isn't there? So if we wanted to think about adjusting that, it would be something that we could do.
These are forecasts for the SOI period, and then the projections beyond the SOI period for the balance of the 10-year LTP are projections, which is based on the best information we have at this time.
I suppose it's easier to come down than go up, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Councillor Cotter.
Look, Morena, nice to see you. My question was following on from Councillor Johansson's, actually, and it was about the potential acquisition and divestments of assets. If the divestment is considered major, it comes to council for a decision. If it's considered material, the council is just informed. So my question is, where is the trigger between the two? And it might be quite a complex answer that you might not be able to answer today, but if you could maybe provide us some information on what actually triggers a major from a material. So in other words, which decision would come to council and which would sit with CCHL?
Yeah, the Companies Act is pretty clear. Well, not even pretty clear. It's very clear on what a major transaction is. So the greater interest is what is material. And again, if I look at the language that you've provided to us in the Statement of Enduring Expectations, it has set a very low threshold in terms of council's desire to have visibility and be informed of anything that may have a material impact, including on council's reputation.
Okay.
So that is a threshold that we're very conscious of.
Okay, yeah.
And as I said, what we're doing is we're developing a responsible investment framework, which is something that you've asked us to do in the letter of expectations as well, and we'll be scheduling a workshop where we'll come through and discuss these matters in detail with you.
Yeah, and I think that's the answer we're probably looking for. There's a very low threshold.
Yeah, the bottom line is we don't want to get any surprises from the subsidiaries, and we don't want you to get any surprises from us.
And we don't want to be surprised. Thank you. Great answer.
Councillor Fields.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Good to see you. This is just a living wage question. So you'll know that council's been very keen to implement a living wage to its employees and contractors. Just wondering what your thoughts are and plans are around implementing living wage across all the like all the way through the kind of the subsidiaries, all the way through to contractors, and just to make sure that everybody who is involved in a subsidiary is entitled to a living wage.
Yeah, so obviously we're conscious that it's an expectation. As you'll recall, the subsidiary companies all achieved that at the end of 2022, I think it was. There was just some last residual 6-7 contracts, I think, within City Care in late 22 that needed to be resolved, and all the subsidiaries have maintained that since that period. The question of extending that to regular and ongoing suppliers and contractors is a requirement we have. What requirement we have of the subsidiaries is that they continue to demonstrate progress on that. Last year was particularly challenging because we had the surprise kind of 10% increase in the living wage, which no business has really budgeted for. So we've given everyone a bit of leeway to work out how they accommodate that, because there's a whole lot of other wage relativities which got impacted by that increase, which don't just impact our businesses, but obviously all our suppliers as well. And last year, actually, what we did was, from a pay equity point of view, which is the broader issue that we're looking at, is spent most of our time resourcing the gender pay research, which we've just received our draft report on. So that was our bigger priority last year. So we're broadly compliant. There are some elements of things that have changed in the last 2 years. The previous government brought in an apprenticeship scheme, so we've got some people that are on apprenticeship schemes that don't get paid the living wage. There's some youth work experience programs where people don't get paid the living wage. But those are very, very minor exceptions in the context of our direct employees.
No, thank you. That's a very comprehensive answer. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that it is quite complex and you don't really know what's around the corner. Yes.
Just on that, have you looked into accreditation, I guess, for each of the subsidiaries?
We haven't specifically required it, so the Enduring Expectations asks the subsidiaries to consider it. So the question of accreditation, whether it's on employment conditions or health and safety conditions or other things, is really a matter for the individual subsidiaries. If the individual subsidiaries see that there is value that accrues from accreditation, I'm sure that they would pursue it. I think the reality, and this is kind of me spitballing a bit off the top of my head, is if I look at the nature of employees and contractors, particularly in the trade sector, so most of this living wage conversation really comes back to City Care. Eco Central. They would all now be above the living wage. I would be surprised if there's any issues potentially outside of cleaners where that is an issue. And generally with the cleaning contracts, there is a requirement that they be paid the living wage. So again, I would expect that we'd be compliant from that point of view. So again, that accreditation issue is one we leave to the subsidiaries.
Okay. Councillor Hanson, I saw your hand up.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just picking up on the Deputy Mayor's point. I guess the reason why I was also interested in what was happening around that investment, divestment policy was I'd also hate for the companies to spend a lot of money doing something, engaging with very expensive consultants to try and have something happen that we weren't aware of. You know what I mean? Like
We're very
it's kind of one of the
that too.
lessons
Yeah.
I think we should learn from that whole business case fiasco, is that a huge amount of money can be spent, and then when it gets to us, it might be a completely different view. So I guess I was interested in kind of what are the key gateways or milestones where we would have input. So that was, I guess, the reason for getting some clarity on that as well, rather than just being told at the end of the
We're
process.
very mindful of that, and mindful of the need for increased engagement with the subsidiaries by us and with CCHL, with council, and also the subsidiaries and ourselves with council joined up and together. So I think it's the increased engagement. It's forecasting when we might be needing to consider some significant decisions and ensuring that we're working towards that in a way which means there's a common understanding of the matters that we're going to need to be discussing well in advance of getting anywhere near a decision or anywhere near a substantive program of work.
Okay, thanks. And just I just have one question around, like, if a company like the airport was doing a revised vision or something, there's been some stuff in the media about them changing
The
their
master plan.
the master plan. Do we get any input into that, or because I don't think we've had any discussion with us about where those priorities are, how that process looks.
We're meeting with the Paul and I are meeting with the airport next week, and that's on our agenda as well. We understand that the master plan is going to be reviewed over the next 12 months, and there's an extensive stakeholder engagement program.
Right.
So we're keen to know where we and you fit into that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just curious, I see over the next 3 years that our total group debt is increasing by $300 million. With the current value of the assets, I think about 5 or 6 billion. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. When
Closer to
does
6 than 5?
more 6 than 5? Yeah. Can you give us any context around the percentage of debt to value ratio, say in 3 years? I mean, obviously you're clear on what the debt will be. How hard is it to predict the ratio to the value of the asset, and when would that ever get to a situation where we would be in some form of difficulty in terms of our relationship with debt?
Yeah, so we are just in the process of doing a capital structure review of the group, and so that's looking at we look at it from a gearing point of view, which is how much debt do you have relative to the equity base at a group level, at a parent company level. So we've talked about the fact that in the past that CCHL, we don't generate any revenue, we don't sell anything, we don't trade with anybody, we don't provide services outside of that to the ratepayers of Christchurch that we get paid for. So we receive dividends at the end of each year, and we have to service our debt from that. So we're looking at what the right level of debt, what the optimal structure at a parent level is, and then at a subsidiary level. The subsidiaries obviously are revenue generators, for-profit entities, so they have capacity to carry debt. It varies across the businesses depending on how much of their income is regulated income and how much of it is exposed to sort of domestic demand, normal domestic activity. By and large, our subsidiaries at the moment have what we would consider to be appropriate gearing ratios. The increases that you are talking to are primarily a function of Orion's investment in expanding the network. That's where the biggest growth in debt and the biggest growth in the value of our assets will occur over the next 10 years. And so Orion's gearing will move from what is a very conservative level at the moment to something that is more aggressive. And ultimately, as the owner of that asset, we do stand behind that. But again, given it's a regulated asset, where the regulator not only has a view on what your return on capital will be, but what an appropriate expansion of the network looks like, there are a lot of eyes that go over whether that is appropriate or not. In terms of those that are exposed to domestic demand, we obviously we apply a harder line to what an appropriate level of debt would look like for those businesses.
And just a little follow-up question. If there was a business of a similar size to ours that had that sort of debt to asset ratio, is that common in the corporate
So
world?
we benchmark all the subsidiaries against their peers, yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor McClellan.
Mine was actually the one you asked before, but I'll ask another. In terms of what I'm hearing on the living wage topic is there's, by and large in practice, most people are getting paid that or more. There are a few exceptions, but also none of the businesses are accredited, and for some it would be difficult, and that flexibility, as you've illustrated, has been useful over the last year where the living wage has gone up by so much. But what I'm keen to understand is are there any businesses within the group that could easily seek accreditation? I'm thinking Orion, the airport, or Enable may have such a low percentage of their workers at that line that it may be no skin off their nose essentially to seek accreditation. So I mean, it's not a question for now, but just something to reflect on.
Look, I mean, I guess we can pick up this issue of considering the benefits of accreditation as part of the broader piece that we're doing around pay equity. Again, kind of for us, that's living wage is one component of that piece. The gender pay research is another component piece. What is reasonable executive remuneration is another piece of that particular puzzle. We could pick that up in that work program.
It might be worth considering, because my fear is that some of the subs may simply not like the idea of living wage and therefore not want to seek accreditation. So I'd like to challenge that.
There's no sense of that.
No, the biggest digestion issue, we've talked about this previously, was always going to be City Care, but they have a national remuneration framework, and the living wage is the entry point into that framework now. So,
Cool, thanks.
I had a question which has disappeared on the screen. So it was just under the social relationships part of the SOI. It talks, there's the health and safety aspect right at the top there, and talks about effective, clear and well understood safety plan for the whole organisation. So that's meaning CCHL and all the subsidiaries, is that correct?
Yes. So obviously, as part of our quarterly reporting, we report back to you on those metrics that are on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Because just, what we've been discussing recently around health and safety, especially around the port, and just making sure, I guess, that all people that work there, I guess, really understand what the processes are and have their questions and things answered, I guess. Yeah, it's something that is on our radar at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, we understand why it would be. Paul and I have spent a lot of time with the chair and chief executive of the port in recent weeks, and we have confidence in the intent and motivation around some of the change that's been worked through at the port.
Yeah.
And certainly have confidence in their good employer intent and motivations. The changes that are being worked through at the moment at the port are very much relating to health and safety and security.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
I do think, though, that it would be advantageous, and we'd like to propose a separate session with some priority where the port and ourselves meet with you to talk through some of the efforts at the port, and given there has been some recent media, we think it would be helpful if we all got in the room and there was able to be a better common understanding of the current position and the way forward.
Great. Yeah, that would be good if we can organise it. Yep. And Councillor Kewen.
Yeah, I've got a couple of broader questions around the intellectual social relationships, natural aspect of it. If you weren't owned by the council, how much of this would be here?
I'd say a reasonable chunk will
Yeah,
still be there.
most of it.
A reasonable chunk?
Yeah.
So that wouldn't really change what's directed by this table? Doesn't change it? Okay, that's interesting. So then on the the continual improvement in operation, health and safety, I know a handful of people that work in various companies within the airport, sorry, not the airport, within the umbrella, one of them being the airport, and the rules and that around health and safety and other aspects of their jobs, there's tons. So and lots of compliance, not just like lots. Which has a cost. Mm-hmm. How much lower are the accident rates at these companies versus everywhere else, given we're spending so much more money than most normal companies?
I'd have to come back to you on the.
It'd be good to see,
the
because
relative.
spending a fortune and having a whole lot of compliance and making the work environment really difficult for various people, it'd be good to know that that has a payoff.
I'm not sure that I'm be interested to know if we are spending substantially more than.
Well, you have officers that go around checking on other people, with literally a clipboard, checking that, measuring out the cones and how many bits of health and safety gear they're wearing, and whereas a normal plumber or a welder just goes in and does the job and gets out.
I mean, it's important as a good employer that we exercise our responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act.
100%, but it's got to relate to measurable difference. Like, what would be even more alarming is if the accident rate was higher and you're spending 6 or 8, 10 times more than other companies. That's all. It would be good if it's measurable. When I was on health board, we, through A&E, once the country started spending billions extra on health and safety, there was no reduction in accidents. There was no reduction in workplace deaths. So you can spend as much as you want, but it doesn't mean anyone's any safer. It would be good to see that measurable, because if also on the other side, if you have got a super low rate, it'll be good to celebrate that and say, well, actually, we do this, and these are the reasons. So, because it goes both ways.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we are conscious of is just testing what we currently report on, and making sure that the information that comes back to us and then to you is relevant and insightful. We get a lot of information on health and safety space, and the different subs themselves can report on the same metrics in different ways. And it's quite difficult to kind of consolidate all that and try and bring back some meaningful insights into you. But obviously, as Brian's saying, at the end of the day, we're all about safe environments and a zero tolerance for anything that puts that at risk. You can have compliance regimes in place, but ultimately it's the culture of the organisation that determines whether there's events or not.
And it'd be nice to also survey staff, especially at the bottom end, that are most likely to have your accidents, and that to see whether that increases or reduces their productivity, whether they get to the point where they say, oh God, I have to put that on again, and then they don't clip the line, and then that's the day they have the accident because they're so overwhelmed by it. It'd be, I don't know if you're carrying out those, but it would be good to know. That's all. And the other one is, and I will raise it in the public domain, is suicide is always an issue in lots of organisations. 900 a year on average in New Zealand, so way higher than road accidents and things. If there's any programs on prevention within that, I know farming and stuff like that has done it. And I remember talking to the CE of City Care a few years ago, about, let's say 5 years ago, about it, and it was a real concern of theirs because they'd had a small run, which no CE likes. So it'll be nice to get an update on that at some point.
Yep.
If anyone, especially if one of them's doing exemplary work on it, it'd be good to know what that is and if it can be shared amongst others. Normally, no one talks about it because it's contagious.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Noted. Thanks.
Are there any further questions, Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, thanks. So I was just a little bit concerned at trying to understand a little bit more about what we're doing around what's happening at LPC. We've got a media article that says the RMTU.
We've already been told, Yanni, we're going to talk about that and talk with the board. So I think.
So we're going to talk with the board. I guess what I wanted to
we're going
understand
to have a
that
meeting together. So
in terms of statement of intent, like we have a big focus on health and safety in terms of people, but what measure do we have around looking at what's happening in regards to industrial relations?
As I said, we've spent a lot of time with the port. We've been out at the port a number of times, and we've had further conversations with the chief executive, with the chair and chief executive, with the chief executive and executive team, because of course we wanted to reassure ourselves and have confidence in the port's good employer intentions and motivations, and we have reassured ourselves on that front. But what we're suggesting is that it would be useful to get in the room with the LPC chair and chief executive, with Paul and I and council, and actually talk that through so that we've all got a common understanding of the issues that are playing out at the port.
Sorry, I understand that. We can meet with them and they'll tell us their perspective. I guess what I'm trying to understand in terms of the statement of intent, how can we have confidence? Like, is there a measure that we've got around industrial relations being good? Because that's ultimately in everyone's best interest when industrial relations are good rather than poor. Is how do we measure, like, separate to the board and the chair and the chief executive telling us what they're doing, how do we measure workplace relations? Do we have any specific measure around that, or is that something that we should be considering?
I'll have to go back and check their SOI in detail, but there is absolutely a strong commitment in their SOI to collaborative, constructive relationships at the port, including with unions. So as Brian said, we have had to satisfy ourselves recently of the issues that are at play, LPC's approach to those issues, and whether or not we feel like they're taking a reasonable approach or not. And we have satisfied ourselves.
So do you meet with the unions to get their perspective?
No.
Not directly, that's an operational matter, but the unions have in the past written to us if they feel sufficiently motivated to do so. We've had no direct contact from the unions in this particular instance.
Right. Okay, thanks.
We've got yes, you can move, but we have an amendment on the table, so we may like the mover and seconder of that to move the whole together. So thank you for answering the questions. So we've got Amendment 3, if you can see that there. So it says notes in the next letter of expectations that CCHL ensures it considers seeking living wage accreditation, hence questions we've had, for all CCHL subsidiaries within 12 months of the acceptance of the statement of intent.
I'm happy to move the whole, Madam Chair,
And
if I can.
yep, you're welcome to do that. And did you want to second that? So we've got, as we talked about earlier, did anyone have any? Yep.
Do we know any financial implications of that? I mean, is it zero or is it some?
At the moment, it's a consider. So I imagine that CCHL will be able to come back and talk with us about this if needed. It's a consider at the moment. So, yeah. So we can find out further information within the next 12 months.
Right, because
so
when my wife says to me, would you consider making tea tonight? I know what that means.
yeah, so does my partner.
It means there's going to be rubbish tea.
Right, so we've got a mover and seconder there. Does anyone have any debate on this? Yes, Councillor Cotter.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank CCHL for supporting this council, and particularly by pivoting with your planned debt reduction and actually converting some of that into a dividend to enable us to reduce our rate increase this year by, I think it was can't remember, 2.4%, something like that, considerable amount. And so I think that we need to recognise that, and thank you for doing that. And also for stepping up with your engagement and fronting up and talking to us regularly like you said that you will. I think it's really, really helpful to form this relationship, and looking forward to having that meeting that we're going to have all together. And also, just going back to that debt thing, remembering that actually CCHL also took on a lot of debt to help us with our earthquake recovery, around 400 million, which you're still paying off. So it's left you with challenges. We have to appreciate that and recognise that, but it's helped council and it's helped the people of Christchurch. So I think we need to recognise that, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. Hi, Councillor Hanson.
I mean, I too want to say thank you for the work that you've been doing. But I do want to just flag a concern. You know, within the space of 3 years, going back to October 2021, where we had the LPC executive and the unions coming together, signing a high performance agreement, high engagement charter, where everyone was really on the same page, everyone was constructive and looking forward to the future, to get to a situation what we've had expressed in the media in the last few days, where a union that represents 30% of the workforce at the port has voted a no confidence in the executive team. I think there's real concern at what's going on, and I think we as a council, as the owner of the port, need to take that seriously. And I think we do. It is incumbent on us to look at our statement of intent and to really understand what measures we have in place to monitor the industrial relations. When we have good industrial relations at our council companies, everyone benefits, right? When we have industrial action, everyone suffers. So the more we can do to get good industrial relations through our council companies, I think the better we will be as a city. And I am deeply troubled by what's happening at the port. And I look forward to us having the ability to look at what we can do to try and get to a better place. But, you know, I just urge councillors to consider what's happened in recent history. I went to the community meeting in Littleton where a number of the union reps attended last year with the port management, and people were really positive about the way they were working together. So even within a space of 12 months, we've got into a situation where people are raising serious concerns. And I appreciate there's two sides to every story, but I think we should be aware that things are not good, and we do need to look at what we can do in terms of our monitoring to try and improve it.
Right. Oh, sorry, we're in debate, so you can't speak to it. So it looks like the debate is finished. So we've moved and seconded. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? So that's carried. Thank you very much. So now we move into